Hello, I'm your host, Neal Howard. Thank you for joining us here on Health Professional Radio. I'm talking today with Brendan Gaughran. He's known as the Liver Medic. He's an expert molecular biologist, and he's with us today to talk about, what the latest science has to say about food, fat, sugar, and weight gain. Those topics we're all very, very interested in. Welcome to Health Professional Radio, Brendan.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Now, you're a molecular biologist. Tell us a little bit about your background and how a molecular biologist gets into holistic health.
Great question. Yes, I graduated with a degree in molecular biology. I spent some time in molecular genetics at the University of Connecticut, transitioned to the pharmaceutical industry, and sort of quickly found out that wasn't the greatest career moves if I wanted to actually solve some of the, today's health problems. Got into the nutraceutical sciences, which is sort of a fancy name for supplements. And then I transitioned into sort of liver and gut health after a number of family members and friends ended up coming down with some rather severe issues. I noticed that there wasn't too many solutions out there, and that was the sort of the genesis of everything.
I guess some personal issues moved you toward holistic health in the liver specifically, or did you kind of migrate to the liver after the fact?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so I've always been in the alternative sciences. When we were in the pharmaceutical industry, we essentially find solutions in nature and try to synthesize them in a chemistry lab. So I just decided it made a whole lot of sense just to go straight to the source. So that was sort of the first step. And then the second step was I ended up having some close family and friends that had type 2 diabetes, obesity, fatty liver, leaky gut. And they all sort of seemed to coalesce at more or less the same time under the sort of the parental heading of metabolic syndrome. And that's where I focus a lot of my energies now, because as I go out in the field, we're noticing that about 1 in 3 people have fatty liver disease, and all of those associated problems go along with it.
So there's science from, years and years ago that said, hey, this type of fat is bad. And then 10 years later, well, it's not that bad. It's actually good for you. Or this cholesterol is bad, but not really. This is good for you. Eat egg whites. Don't eat egg whites. Eat wheat. Don't eat wheat. Let's talk about where we are today as far as, our food is concerned.
Yeah, boy, that's I remember reading a statistic earlier that 52% of people would rather do their taxes than try to figure out what a healthy diet means. So I think we're sort of getting at the crux of this. And there's a lot of, we're in the sort of the age of information. We're also in the age of misinformation. And so companies that have sort of dedicated themselves to creating food out of chemicals are putting a lot of science behind it. And not all of it is correct. It's partially funded through the universities that are funded by, these large national corporations that are invested in sort of not telling us the truth. So, if I were to go back into the history of things, back in the 70s, there was a very flawed study that was done in Europe that had put both trans fats and saturated fats and healthy fats together, and came out with the conclusion that these were basically the main drivers for health issues, cardiovascular problems, brain, you name it, the cholesterol, et cetera, and that to get these out of your diet would be a good move. Congress ended up intervening and said, we got to do something, pushed major food companies to take fat out of food. And of course, when we do that, the food tastes terrible.
Absolutely.
And so what they did immediately after that was they started to push a lot of sugar into it. Now we know, thanks to Dr. Lustig out in UC San Francisco, he's the leader in sugar research, identifying sugar as the main poison out there. So what we have to do now is we have to stay away from the synthetic fats and the highly processed, that becoming rancid through the process, which ends up getting into our body and creating free radical damage. And then, of course, we also have to work very hard at getting rid of sugars, and not all sugars are the same either. So this is sort of the confluence of things. We have to identify healthy fats, not unhealthy fats. And we have to get sugars out of the diet and absolutely avoid synthetic sugars. So that's sort of the plan.
You're a liver medic, the liver medic. But the way you're talking now, you've got this well-rounded knowledge of how to maintain a healthy diet and healthy lifestyle. It seems a huge task just to sift through all of this, as you say, information and misinformation to arrive at something that's going to let me, just the average guy, live a healthy life throughout my lifetime. How do I sift through this, without going to all the lectures?
Yeah, So how do we distill this down? So a lot of the discussion, that I put out there and that commonly takes place is around having a healthy diet. So it's making sure you get enough water into your system. It's avoiding trans fats. It's focusing on healthy fats like butter and olive oil and coconut oil, and not cooking with olive oil. It's avoiding processed foods, fast foods. We all kind of know those parts of it. Avoiding sodas, avoiding artificial sugars like aspartame and amino sweet and all of the other variations and words that they end up coming up with. And knowing that really the only healthy sugars out there is raw honey and maple syrup. And even then to sort of use those, sort of carefully and judiciously. And then to focus on superfoods and cooking at home and making sure you avoid GM or GMO type products. And it's not necessarily because of the molecular configurations that take place in the lab. It's because it allows farmers to dump a lot more pesticides and herbicides on the product that is getting into the product and now getting into you, and it does the damage to the bacteria and flora in your body. And so when we started to focus on liver health, we were quickly noticing that the first barrier to get blown down is in the gut. So as I started with being sort of the liver medic, it quickly brought me to gut health. And if your gut ends up breaking down, that microbiome that has all those wonderful bacteria in there that you were given from birth, if those start to get destroyed and get replaced by something that is sort of deleterious and dangerous, then a lot more toxins flow into the body. That goes directly to the liver. It starts to challenge the liver, and a myriad of problems end up occurring as a result of that. So you're right. Let's make it simple so that people can quote unquote digest this information, but that is essentially what we're after.
Now, you've got a web presence as well. Talk about your website.
Yeah, so the website is livermedic.com. We get a lot of people on the website. Typically, people are looking at the articles. We try to bring in the most current scientific information and then sort of change it so that the layperson can understand what's going on. So I go out and I read the latest and greatest in white papers from endocrinologists and gastroenterologists and cardiologists and all the major medical journals. Pick out the stuff that I think are most pertinent to the average individual, and then break it down so that they can understand exactly what's going on with takeaway points. So that's sort of what we try to do with the website. And of course, you can also buy the products as well, but it is geared towards education as well as supplementation.
When it comes to supplementation, you're an expert in that area as well. Some of us, we're not going to adhere to that diet for too awful long, at least not long enough to make it beneficial. Do you advise on supplements with a diet that may not be the best diet that's recommended? That's why you're doing the supplements, or do you always supplement a good diet?
Yeah, good question. I'd say a little bit of both. So individuals who don't have the greatest of diets always should supplement. That is mainly focused on ensuring that you constantly have good, healthy gut health, and of course are always trying to remove toxins from the body. So that includes liver health, because we're constantly bombarded by toxins in the environment and our food. And then individuals who have not eaten well at all and need a kickstart. And then there are also those individuals who are what I would call purists. I would include myself in that category. I eat very clean, but when I'm on the road, I don't consistently have complete control over what I eat,
Yeah.
and I'm always taking a liver a detoxification supplement as a result of that.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you, Brendan.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neal Howard. Been talking with Brendan Gaughran, the liver medic, expert molecular biologist, talking with us about what the latest science has been saying about food, fat, sugar, and weight gain, and how we can sift through this, mountain of information and, as Brendan says, misinformation to arrive at a diet that's going to let us live the best that we can health-wise for as long as we can. Transcripts and audio of this program are available at healthprofessionalradio.com.au and also at hpr.fm, and you can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes.